Good morning. Today is August 27th, 2020. The time is 9:07 a.m. and this is the duly called meeting of the Texas Low-Level Radioactive Waste Disposal Compact Commission. Due to the governor's March 13th, 2020 order and proclamation of a state disaster affecting all counties in Texas due to COVID-19 and the governor's March 16th, 2020 suspension of certain provisions of the Open Meetings Act. This meeting is being held by video webinar as authorized under Government Code Section 551.127. Members of the public that are listening in, when asked for public comment, if you would please hit the raise your hand function and I will do my best to recognize you. We've had one technical difficulty already this morning. Commissioner Edwards had an internet outage at her house. So she is participating by phone. We will allow her to speak if she wants to comment on an issue, but she will not be voting on anything, but that is okay because we have a quorum without her. If at any time today we have any other technical problems, obviously we'll address them as quickly as we can, but if anyone has a problem hearing or seeing anything, please raise your hand, let us know that. There's also, commissioners, a chat function at the bottom of your screen that if you need to communicate in any way to raise a technical issue, you can either wave your hands so we can see you on the screen or you can hit the chat function. If for any reason we need to go into executive session today, we will address that as we get there, but commissioners, so you know, we would likely get off and call into a conference call number to conduct our executive session, but I don't know that we'll need one today. So with that, we will call the meeting to order. I believe we have a quorum because I see Judge Dolgener, Commissioner Morris, Vice Chairman Salzman, Commissioner Mundy, Commissioner Saudick. As always, we are joined by our Attorney General Representative, Dave Gordon, who we appreciate, and the man that makes all of this happen and without which we couldn't meet, Andrew. We appreciate him being present today. We also appreciate everyone who's joined us today. Based on the list of attendees, I see everyone is here from TCEQ. We especially appreciate Commissioner Janeka joining us. I see that Dan Schrum from the Low Level Forum is on the line. We appreciate that. Diane Fulmer, our accountant who is doing yeoman's work recently with our LAR, is joining us. Thank you, Diane, for being here.
Brandon,
Kathy
just
Davis.
A quick note.
Sorry.
Do you see that number 469-586-7468?
Yes.
That is Commissioner Edwards.
Okay, thank you. I see Kathy Davis from the Southwest Forum has joined us. We appreciate you being here, Kathy. Have I missed any elected officials or staff from elected officials today? Brody, we also see you. I appreciate you joining us, Brody Burks from Commissioner Janeka's office. With that, I'll also ask if we have any members of the media joining us today. If so, please raise your hand. Do not see any hand raised, so we can proceed and say whatever we want because no one from the media is here. We are now to agenda item 4, which is public comment. This is our traditional period where we allow public comment of a general nature. We will also allow public comment for each specific item on our agenda, but if anyone would like to address the commission for a general statement, please let me know by raising your hand. I see no hands raised. So with that, we will move on then. We are now blazing right through and getting to item 5 on our agenda, which is the consideration and possible action on import applications. The first is in item 5A, commissioners, which is the import application of Aerojet Ordnance Tennessee. In your electronic notebook, this is tab 9. With that, I will turn it over to Vice Chairman Salzman and the technical committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Aerojet Ordnance Tennessee that was received June 16, 2020. It's number 1-0262-00. And in that request, Aerojet Ordnance Tennessee is a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have specifically requested authorization for Class A unstable depleted uranium oxides and metal waste, and that those waste streams were approved for disposal at the site in letter correspondence from TCEQ dated August 14, 2020. Aerojet has requested a volume of 300 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 10 curies. The waste will be coming from the state of Tennessee, which is part of the Southeast Compact and does not require export authorization. And let's see, Aerojet has requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2021. The technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for the technical committee on the import application of Aerojet Ordnance Tennessee? I see Commissioner Bradford's joined us. Good morning, Peter.
Morning, Brad. Sorry for the delay.
No problem. Any questions on item 5A for the Vice Chairman on the import application of Aerojet Ordnance Tennessee? Hearing none, we will move on to a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the import application from Aerojet Ordnance Tennessee, number 1-0262-00. The waste class is Class A. The waste form is unstable. The waste stream is depleted uranium oxides and metal. The volume is 300 cubic feet. The radioactivity is 10 curies. The waste will come from the state of Tennessee, and the agreement would have a termination date of August 31, 2021.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about the import application of Aerojet Ordnance Tennessee represented in item 5A on our agenda? Hearing none, is there any public comment on item 5A? And if you would like to comment, please do so by raising your hand electronically. Seeing none, we can move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Aerojet Ordnance Tennessee represented on item 5A in our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 All opposed, no. Motion passes. We can now move on to item 5B, the import application of the U.S. Army Joint Munitions Command Palo Verde. With that, I will turn it back over to Vice Chairman Salzman.
The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from the U.S. Army Joint Munitions Command that was received June 16, 2020. It's number 1-0263-00. In this case, the U.S. Army is a generator, a federal generator, requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have requested authorization for Class A unstable depleted uranium oxides and metal waste, and those waste streams were approved for disposal by TCEQ in letter correspondence dated August 14, 2020. They have requested a volume of 1,500 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 45 curies. Similar to the last request, the waste will originate from Tennessee, which is part of the Southeast Compact and does not require export authorization. And they have also requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2021. Excuse me, the technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the technical committee on item 5B?
I do have one. This one says business address, Aerojet Ordnance, Tennessee. Why is this different than the last Aerojet? It appears to come from the same physical.
It's come from the same physical location. However, this waste is as a result of operations performed by Aerojet on U.S. Army property, in this case, U.S. Army depleted uranium. So it's typical every year we get 2 import applications. One's from Aerojet and one's from the U.S. Army. So Aerojet does some commercial processing involving depleted uranium. They also do processing for the Army. So any waste that's from the Army operations has to be under an agreement with the Army.
Okay. Thank you.
John, I think I ask this question every time too, and I think I know the answer, but I'll ask it again. Why doesn't this go into the DOE cell?
It's sort of unusual, but there are a couple of federal waste streams that are, when they made the law and regulations years ago, there are a couple of federal waste streams that are considered commercial low-level waste. This is one of those waste streams. There's also some from the U.S. Navy that are considered federal waste streams and eligible for commercial disposal, as opposed to waste that typically gets generated by the Department of Energy is never considered commercial, and that always goes to a federal, or would go to the federal cell at WCS if that's where they wanted to dispose of it.
Thanks. I have another question, which I ask periodically just so I can keep it fresh in my mind. Can you give an explanation of what stable versus unstable is for someone who's not technical like me?
Unstable waste is waste that does not meet the criteria established by the NRC to make for a waste form to be stable. For example, paper, plastic, trash, because it over time can compact, it's considered unstable. And the reason for the stable unstable is that when you put waste into the ground and you eventually cover it over, you don't want the cap to subside and create a potential way for precipitation to enter into that waste disposal cell. So they want waste to be stable, or if it's unstable, it has to be disposed of in a particular manner in the cell.
Okay, thank you. That's educational. Any more questions for the technical committee on item 5B? Hearing none, we can move on to a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the import application from the U.S. Army Joint Munitions Command. The waste form is unstable. The waste class is Class A. The waste stream is depleted uranium oxides and metal. The actual number for that import agreement is 1-0263-00. The waste volume is 1,500 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 45 curies, and the agreement would terminate August 31, 2021.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about item 5B, the import application of the U.S. Army Joint Munitions Command? Any public comment on item 5B? Again, please do, if you would like to comment, please raise your hand. Hearing none, we can move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of the U.S. Army Joint Munitions Command, Palo Verde, represented in item 5B on our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. I'll note for our record that I think Commissioner Sadek dropped off, but he told us he was having internet problems, so that's probably the reason why, but we still have a quorum, so I believe we can proceed. Correct, Dave? Okay.
Brandon, did I hear you mention Palo Verde in your
That's the name. It says U.S. Army Joint Munitions Command Palo Verde. Is it listed wrong on the?
That is correct. Palo Verde is a different,
Facility?
it should be just U.S. Army Munitions Command.
Okay, I'm sorry. Then it is incorrectly listed on our agenda. So we will make that notation and make sure that Palo Verde is not part of the actual contract.
It was not part of my motion.
Okay, thank you. With that correction, we can then move on to item 5C, which is the import application of Ameren, Missouri. And we'll turn it back over to the technical committee.
The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Ameren, Missouri. That was received June 22nd, 2020. It's number 1-0264-00. In this case, Ameren is a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have specifically requested authorization for Class A, Class B, and Class C unstable resins, filters, and DAW. Those waste streams were approved for disposal via letter correspondence from TCEQ dated August 14, 2020. They have requested authorization for 765 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 100 curies. In this case, the waste will originate from the state of Missouri and is part of the Midwest Compact and does not require export authorization. And they have requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2021. The technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sorry. Any questions for the technical committee on the import application of Ameren, Missouri, represented in item 5C? Hearing none, we can move on to a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the import application from Ameren, Missouri. It's number 1-0264-00. The waste class is Class A, Class B, and Class C. The waste form is unstable. The waste description is resin, filters, and DAW. Volume is 765 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 100 curies. The waste will originate from the state of Missouri, and the agreement would terminate August 31, 2021.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about item 5C, the import application of Ameren, Missouri? Any public comment on the import application of Ameren, Missouri? Seeing no hands raised, we will move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Ameren, Missouri, represented in item 5C in our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. We can now move on to item 5D, the import application of Aileron Nuclear Services. We will turn it back over once again to John.
The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Aileron Nuclear Services that was received July 7, 2020. It's number 1-0265-00. In this case, Aileron is a broker who is a licensed waste collector and processor requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have specifically requested authorization for Class A, Class B, and Class C unstable sealed sources, plastic, paper, metals, powder, sludge, and debris. And those waste streams were approved for disposal at the site via letter correspondence from TCEQ dated August 14, 2020. They have requested a volume of 2,000 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 500 curies. In this case, they've indicated the waste will originate from all states and territories except Texas and Vermont. So I would note that any waste from the southwestern Rocky Mountain or Northwest compacts will generally require export authorization. To date, Aileron has not provided export authorizations or generator authorizations, so those would need to be provided in subsequent correspondence with the Commission. In addition, Aileron has indicated that the waste is from small quantity generators. However, based on the requested volume in the Curies, I would disagree with that request, and so I think this should just be treated as a regular generator. In addition, the applicant has requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2021. Technical committee does recommend approval, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
I have a question. If this is coming from all 50 states, why is for the areas where it could go to one of the existing compacts like Barnwell, why should we be accepting imports from something that might potentially go to that facility?
I think that's a reasonable question. One issue that I think many of the brokers face, and perhaps this is why this broker has requested that, and that is they receive waste in from many different generators. And sometimes it can be difficult for them to try to sort through which waste is from who and make separate shipments. So I think probably for a matter of convenience to the broker, it's easier for them to be able to send everything to one place. I have to admit, I am less familiar with the process at Barnwell and how you get access to that site. I know it's only for Barnwell, I guess right now, is only for the state of South Carolina. And I'm not sure, is there another, what's the other state that is part of that compact?
Connecticut? There's some weird state, I think.
It may be Connecticut.
So,
Jeff, I'm a little unfamiliar with how a broker gets access to Barnwell for waste that would be from South Carolina and or Connecticut. Linda or anyone else, perhaps you have additional insight into this.
Yeah, I would assume that, I mean, from a layman's perspective, what it ultimately is you have, I mean, I'm sure this isn't the real way it happens, but you have a barrel and various waste goes into that barrel. And like John said, you can't identify once it all goes in the barrel what came from where, because it's all basically mixed together. And so for purposes of shipping and containerization it for disposal, you know, it would probably be economically unviable for them to actually pull out something from South Carolina or Connecticut and then go ship it to Barnwell only. Because I think obviously the theory behind a broker is they gather many different people's waste, combine them all, and it's economical for them to dispose of that combined waste as opposed to the individual trying to dispose of that waste in a very small quantity.
Linda, you were going to say something. I couldn't hear your audio. Could you try again?
Okay, can y'all hear me? Right
Yes,
now?
ma'am.
Sometimes there's a waste stream that some of the other compacts can't accept. Is that true, John? That there's
I'm sorry, say again, Linda. I'm having a little hard time hearing you.
okay. Sometimes there's a waste stream that another compact can't accept, but ours could.
That's true. That's also a possibility. The other thing with the Southeast or the, I think it's called the Atlantic Compact that actually has Barnwell, is they have some sort of a quota system that I'm not particularly familiar with, but I know I think you have to apply in advance to get permission to dispose of waste, even from within the compact at that facility. Maybe Lisa Edwards, if she can at least give us some volume may have some insight on this one.
Lisa, I think I have pushed the button to allow you to talk, but you are on mute. Also, I'm being told that the Atlantic Compact is South Carolina, New Jersey, and Connecticut.
Basically, what this guy's doing is he's reserving 2,000 cubic feet and 500 curies. Is this in addition to other space that he's reserved? I mean, it just looks as if he's now going to be able to go to shippers or to generators and say, okay, I've got the space in the compact facility, but is this, do we know whether Aileron is kind of incrementally reserving space like this for any state and all that sort of thing?
Well, this is the only application that they've submitted to our commission for the upcoming fiscal year. I see that Lisa unmuted.
Lisa, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, I think you all have covered it mostly. The Atlantic Compact is the compact that has the Barnwell site. It serves Connecticut, New Jersey, and South Carolina. You know, the members of that compact have a certain volume of space that's reserved for them in the Barnwell disposal cell, and that's done on an annual basis. If they don't need that space, or if they have someone in the compact that needs extra space because of a big project or whatever that has generated a larger volume of waste, they can give that space to other people. They can also pay an additional amount above what their fees are for being a member of that compact if they need additional space and no one has unused allocation that they want to share. So when Aileron accepts waste from a variety of people, I think that you're right, but we really should, you know, if we want a definitive answer, talk to one of the Atlantic Compact commissioners. But my understanding is that, you know, they accept waste. The commingling can happen in the waste processing, and therefore that's probably why they've listed all 50 states. If we wanted to take an exception, or if there's a great concern about this, you know, we could perhaps say, you know, 47 states. But, you know, in fact, it's usually financially advantageous to the large generators in those 3 states to use Barnwell. And they most likely would, unless there's a real unusual situation, utilize their access to Barnwell. So,
and I think this dovetails with what Dick is asking and the question that Jeff is asking, because I think the practical answer is, at this point, Aileron doesn't know where this waste is really coming from. And so they are, as all brokers do, they're reserving their space, and then they go out and negotiate with these small generators to gather it and dispose it. So it may come from South Carolina, Connecticut, and New Jersey, and then again, it may not. And so their method is they have to list all states other than Texas and Vermont, since they don't know where the waste is coming from. But to Dick's point, I think we obviously measure how much of the space they ask for they end up using. And if it ever was something that we thought they were reserving more space than they were showing to have historically used, and they don't have a justification for it, I think we would take that into account when an application was before us. But to date, I think brokers use the majority of the space that they ask for.
Yeah, and I would submit to the commission that right now, what we're concerned about is the economic viability of the site. So if people want to send waste to the site, that's advantageous because it helps us keep the site open for our generators. and helps, theoretically reduce the cost to our end compact generators. I do not believe that we are anywhere close to threatening the reserve capacity that's needed for our compact members.
Lisa, let me say that's not my concern even in the slightest, and I don't want to get into this. Isn't the place to have this big discussion, but my concern relates to issues we're having working on our contingency plan, specifically for, and I want to be careful using the word small, but there are a couple of sources of B and C in our state that do not have a good solution in our contingency plan that we're working on. We had sought to get backstops from other compacts if an emergency occurred, and basically got the stiff arm from them saying, no, thanks, we're not interested. So I'll say my level of aggravation right now is kind of increased, and I'm not inclined to allow people from that compact to use our facility when they're not willing to at least provide an emergency relief situation for our people in our state. So my inclination right now is to create a carve out and say 47 states and carve out those three. And if that broker has a unique situation from those 3 states, then come back to us with another import permit. But I think we need to start pushing back until we get cooperation from that facility for an emergency situation. I'm not inclined to let them do routine business with us.
Commissioner, I want to understand your concern just a little better. For most of our large generators, ones that would have the BNC waste stream, they have the capacity in an emergency situation to store on site.
Well, let me just say, that's not that, I said I don't want to get into the contingency plan. It's for some very small people that don't have storage capacities, have unique situations. They're, in the scheme of the overall picture, teeny tiny. And we'll get into it. We're not going to get into the plan draft today. We're very close to finishing it. But there are a couple of unique, like medical situations or a couple oil field valve situations, and they don't have a good storage solution. And so, we, in our report where we're heading is would like a backstop from the other compact in an emergency to accept those people without a good storage situation. So that's why I think that's where my comments are in that mindset.
I imagine it would take legislative action on their part to be able to provide that.
And that's part of our report. We are talking about that, but there's not even a willingness to work on a solution. We got a no thanks, and that was the end of it. But you're correct. I don't want to jump ahead to our report. We won't have it. It's not finished for today, but it will be in a few weeks.
And
That's the only my comment.
I will only say in response to Commissioner Mundy is obviously the decision on whether or not another compact would enter an arrangement with us to take BNC waste on a limited basis in an emergency is a decision made obviously by the compact and the states that are members in that compact. In this instance, we're talking about generators within those states that don't necessarily control that decision.
Well, I would like some sort of consideration that they must go to that facility first, and then if they can't, they can come back again to us. I think for routine business, they ought to be going there. Like I said, I don't want to take it out on this broker. That's not the appropriate thing, but it's frustrating. I'll leave it at that. And it's not the broker's fault.
What is the address for Aileron?
Pennsylvania.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
Wampum, Pennsylvania.
So Pennsylvania, just for the record, is not part of the Atlantic Compact. I understand your point, though, Commissioner Mundy.
Yeah, it's just gathering it from 50 states is the reason for my comment.
Okay.
Well, I'm not voting today, obviously, because I can't be on camera, but I do believe that I understand the frustration that you may be having, or that you are having, with the compact not being able to provide emergency relief or being willing to entertain that right now. But this generator is outside of that compact, and I believe that the financial drivers within the compact would almost certainly, in most cases, cause that waste to go to Barnwell and not go outside of their compact. I can't say that for certain, though.
Yeah. All right. Like I said, I didn't want to divert off on our contingency issues today, so I'll step back on that. So, if y'all want to go forward, I will get on board with this. Like I said, I don't want to take it out on the broker per se, especially for relatively small overall, considering what might come from those few. But I do want it to be noted that's a problem that I really would like some change of attitude.
Brandon, go ahead, Lisa.
Well, actually, I just got some information that it just reminded me that although we may be frustrated with the Atlantic Compact, we may want to remember that before our disposal site opened, they took B&C waste for the whole nation for decades. So they have shouldered quite a bit of burden with disposal of waste for this country, including our compact members. So
Again, it's only for an emergency scenario. We're dealing with emergency planning situations for some we'll get into it at our next meeting, but we've identified a couple of very unique situations in this state where in an emergency, if our facility shuts down, they need a solution. And it's not the power plants. It's a medical source and a oil field source. So with that, let's just move on.
Brandon, perhaps we could
I'll make a motion to approve this one. Let's get on with it, and we'll deal with it next month or October.
I'm sorry, John. What
perhaps
were you
we
gonna
could
say?
send a letter to Aileron and ask them to provide some additional explanation of why they would take waste from Atlantic compact states and send it to the facility in Texas.
Yeah, I think we can definitely do that. Any more questions for the technical committee before we move on to a motion? All right, I think that means we're ready for a motion, John.
Make a motion that we approve the import application from Aileron Nuclear Services. That's number 1-0265-00. The waste class is Class A, Class B, and Class C. The waste form is unstable. The waste description is sealed sources, plastic, paper, metals, powder, sludge, and debris. Total volume is 2,000 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 500 curies. The waste will originate from all states and territories except Texas and Vermont. And Aileron will be required to provide in no more than 4 individual correspondence letters, export authorizations and generator authorizations for the waste that they actually plan to ship. And the agreement would terminate August 31, 2021.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Karen Haddon had her hand up, so I would like to recognize her now for any comment she has on this import application.
Hi, this is Karen. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Karen, it's perfect.
Thanks so much. I'm not sure if this waste is at all related to a shipment that went prior to this. So I'm asking in that regard if anybody knows. But there was a shipment that went from Pennsylvania to the WCS site, and it went through Chicago. And when it was south of the airport region in Chicago at a rail station, one of the cars caught fire that had low-level waste in it. Or it caught fire before then. It was discovered there. And then they had to detach a second car that also had low-level waste. That was what was included in the report. Some people have said maybe that was coming from Aileron. I cannot tell you for sure whether that's true. So I'm just curious as to whether this shipment is in any way related or similar to that waste, and if that is of concern or not.
I think I can say definitively that this import application would not have previous shipments associated with it, because this is a prospective application. Obviously, until we authorize it, they can't ship anything under this agreement. But I don't know if the previous shipment that you're talking about was from Aileron and going to WCS. I don't know if anybody else knows the answer to that question or not.
I know for sure that it was headed to WCS and coming from Pennsylvania. I will send you what report I have seen, but I would ask you to, look into that just to make sure that we don't have something more going on the rail line that's problematic.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. Any other discussion about the motion to approve the import application of Aileron Nuclear Services represented in item 5D? Any other public
I
comment?
have,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can
Lisa.
you,
Yes.
so I have one last comment that I just want to get on the record. I suspect that it's true that no other compact besides the Atlantic Compact is willing to provide us emergency relief either, simply because they don't have a facility. So the fact that one compact has provided disposal for their generators and calling them out for not providing emergency relief that no one else is willing to provide seems not quite right.
Well, let's take it up when we get to, we'll have a contingency report and we can talk about it then. So, like I said, I don't want to take it out on this broker, and I just, the question inherently raised the issue. So let's just take it to we will have a report on contingency issues later, and we're going to have our report out in probably a few weeks.
Any other comments about item 5D on our agenda? Or any other public comments? Again, please do so by raising your hand. Hearing none, we can move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Aileron Nuclear Services represented by item 5D in our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 All opposed, no. Motion passes. We can move on to item 5E, the import application of Unitech Services, which, Commissioners, is tab 13 in your electronic notebook. Now we'll turn it back over to the Vice Chairman.
The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from, I want to get the name right, Unitech Services Group, Inc. And in this case, they are a broker who is a licensed waste processor. And they have requested authorization for Class A unstable DAW metals, flowable material, resin, asbestos, and depleted uranium. And those waste streams were approved by TCEQ for disposal at the site via letter correspondence dated August 14, 2020. Unitech has requested a volume of 650 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 10 curies. They have indicated the waste will originate from all states except Vermont. So I would note initially that our commission has no authority to regulate the disposal of waste generated in Texas at the compact facility. So we would not offer anything with regard to Texas waste. In addition, any waste that would originate from the Southwestern, Rocky Mountain, or the Northwest compacts generally requires export authorization, and the applicant has not provided those export authorizations or generator authorizations. And finally, they've requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2021. So the technical committee recommends approval of this import application minus any waste originating within the state of Texas. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the technical committee on item 5E, the import applications of Unitech Services? Hearing none, we can move on to a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the import application from Unitech Services Group, Inc., number 1-0266-00. The waste class is Class A, just Class A. The waste form is unstable. The waste stream is DAW, metals, flowable material, resin, asbestos, and depleted uranium. The total volume is 650 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 10 curies. The waste may originate from all states except Vermont and Texas. Any waste that would originate from the Southwestern, Rocky Mountain, or Northwest compacts will require export authorization. And the applicant will have to provide those export authorizations and generator authorizations via separate correspondence, no more than 4 letters. And the agreement would terminate August 31, 2021.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about item 5E on our agenda? Any public comment about item 5E? Seeing no hands raised, we can move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Unitech Services, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. We can now move on to item 5F, the import application of Entergy Louisiana. And I'll turn it back over to our Vice Chairman.
The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Entergy Louisiana Waterford Steam Electric Station Unit 3. That application was received July 21, 2020. It's number 1-0267-00. In this case, Waterford is a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have requested authorization for Class A, Class B, and Class C unstable resins, filters, irradiated components, and dry active waste, and those waste streams were for disposal at the site via letter correspondence from TCEQ dated August 14, 2020. They have requested authorization for 3,500 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 600 curies. That waste will originate from the state of Louisiana, which is part of the Central Compact and does not require export authorization. And they have requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2021. Technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sorry. Any questions for the technical committee on the import application of Entergy Louisiana represented in item 5F? Hearing none, we can move on to a motion.
Make a motion we approve the import application from Entergy Louisiana Waterford Steam Electric Station Unit 3. It's number 1-0267-00. The waste class is Class A, Class B, and Class C. The waste form is unstable. The waste stream is resins, filters, irradiated components, and dry active waste. The volume is 3,500 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 600 curies. The waste will originate from the state of Louisiana, and the agreement would terminate August 31, 2021.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about item 5F, the import application of Entergy Louisiana? Any public comment on item 5F? Seeing no hands raised, we will move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Entergy Louisiana, represented in item 5F, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 All opposed, no. Motion passes. We are down to our last import application. It is item 5G, the import application of Next Era Dwayne Arnold Energy Center. We will turn it over one last time to the Vice Chairman.
The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Next Era Energy Dwayne Arnold Energy Center that was received July 23, 2020, and it's number 1-0268-00. In this case, Dwayne Arnold is a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They've specifically requested authorization for Class A, Class B, and Class C stable and unstable RWCU resin, condensate resin, and filters. And those waste streams were approved for disposal via letter correspondence from TCEQ dated August 14, 2020. They have requested a volume of 2,058 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 664 curies. That waste will originate from Iowa, which is part of the Midwest Compact and does not require export authorization. And they've requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2021. The technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the technical committee on item 5G, the import application of Next Era Dwayne Arnold Energy Center? Hearing none, we can move on to a motion.
I make a motion we approve the import application from Next Era Energy Dwayne Arnold Energy Center. It's number 1-0268-00. Waste class is Class A, Class B, and Class C. The waste form is stable and unstable. The waste description is RWCU resin, condensate resin, and filters. The volume is 2,058 cubic feet. Total radioactivity is 664 curies. The waste will come from the state of Iowa, and the agreement would terminate August 31, 2021.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about item 5G on our agenda? Any public comment on item 5G? Seeing no hands raised, we will move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Next Era Dwayne Arnold Energy, represented in item 5G on our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 All opposed, no. Motion passes. And with that, we have concluded item 5, and we have been going about an hour. So I know we've worn John out, so I think maybe it would be a good idea to take a 10-minute break. So we will mute everyone's line. You can turn off your video if you want, but we will reconvene in about 10 minutes at about 10 after the hour. Thank you. I have started the recording once again. And Andrew, or the attendees can hear us, right? I don't need to do anything to trigger that. assuming that they have the ability to hear us, we can move on. Our next item on our agenda is item 6, which is the report from Dave Carlson at WCS. So let me find Dave's name. Dave, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. We will turn it over to Mr. Carlson for a report from WCS.
Great. This is David Carlson from Waste Control Specialists. And let me report first on how much capacity we've used so far this year. In the current fiscal year, beginning September 1st of 2019, we have disposed from in-compact generators 14,438 cubic feet and 669 curies. And from out of compact, we've disposed of 24,491 cubic feet and 20,675 curies, and that's through July. Overall disposal at the site from inception through July 2020 is 188,524 cubic feet. So that's about 2.09% of the total licensed capacity of the site, and 476,860 curies decayed, which is about 12% of the capacity of the site. In terms of payments to the state and to TCEQ, that has not changed from the July meeting because those payments are made on a quarterly basis, and the total since inception remains for TCEQ just about $58 million, to Andrews County about $13 million, for a grand total of $71 million. In terms of the site and site operation, we continue in full operation. We have not shut down at any point due to the COVID pandemic, and our protective measures remain in place due to COVID-19, which restricts tours and restricts a few other things to what's absolutely necessary. Some of our administrative people work from home and so on, but we have been very pleased to this point to be able to maintain a full staff on site and maintain full operation. And that's all I have to report today. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Carlson?
Yes, Brandon. Dave, could you, I think it would be instructive, could you provide a sort of a short explanation of the difference in how WCS handles stable versus unstable waste when it arrives at the site?
Well, everything that goes into the compact waste facility is handled basically the same. So it's disposed of in modular concrete containers. Those modular concrete containers all have to be backfilled so that any void space in either the package that goes inside the modular concrete container or the modular concrete container itself has all those voids filled in with dense material. The intent of that, of course, is that there will be no subsidence going forward at some point in the future. So again, it's all handled basically the same way for anything going to the compact waste facility.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlson? I have a few, but I'll wait for everyone else.
Yeah. So Dave, Richard Alger, came out in the Andrews County News that the bond has been defeased. Can you bring us up to date on that?
Yeah, I definitely don't want to speak out of turn, and I know there's some legal issues involved here that others might understand better than I do. But the situation was at the acquisition by J.F. Lehman, those bonds were effectively dealt with, but my understanding, and this is just the way that I understand it to be, is that was dealt with by putting the money in escrow rather than early payment of those. So JFL had completed their obligation on ownership at closing, and then from a legal perspective, the funds were paid out of escrow at the time that was intended. Anything beyond that, I'd have to do research to find exactly, but I think that's the bottom line, that at closing of the acquisition by JFL. The legal obligations were dealt with by JFL, and then the actual point of defeasance of the bonds is when that last payment came out of escrow and completed that defeasing of the bonds. You or Judge Falconer would perhaps even know that better than I would.
Well, I was just under the deal that Andrews County is no longer on the stream anyway.
Right, and I would say legally they were not from that date of acquisition, but all these other things had to take place apparently in order to get to the final signature on the final document.
Yeah, they always said, well, you're 99% off, and now I'm thinking I'm 100% off. And I hadn't talked to Charlie about it either, so I seen him at Lions Club. We didn't talk about it. But anyway, that's all I had on you, Dave.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Any other questions? Dave, I had one question about capacity reporting. When you list a total capacity that I think you said you've taken up 2.09% of your licensed capacity, how does that compare to current as-built capacity? How full is the currently constructed cell?
Right, so we build out in phases, and each phase is certainly much less than the licensed capacity of the facility. The first phase, I believe, is 475,000 cubic feet. So if you compare the used capacity to that, it's somewhere in the range of half of the built-out capacity. Currently, if you looked at the facility, we're adding waste on the third level. There's still a fourth level to go in that first phase as well. So there's still quite a bit of capacity available. We're looking out several years before we have to even consider construction.
And each level actually gets bigger because of the slope of the walls. Is that accurate?
The lowest level would have the most capacity simply because we have to maintain slope as we stack waste within the cell.
And at one point there was a discussion about the concrete liner that was partially done in the constructed cell. Is the concrete liner still a requirement, or has that been waived?
No, the concrete liner is a requirement. I would submit that it provides no additional protection because concrete is much less permeable, is much more permeable than the red bed clay that we're in, but it is a requirement currently.
And is the concrete liner all the way to the top of the existing cell, or is it actually not completely done yet?
The concrete liner is up to the top of the third level. Before we placed any waste in the fourth level, we would add the concrete liner up to the top of the fourth level.
And I think I used to confuse this issue, and so I'll ask you to clarify it. From a Curie standpoint, all of the licensed Curies could go into a single cell if that happened to be the case of the waste you took in. There's not a cell-by-cell limit on Curie activity. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's only a cumulative limit.
That was my questions. Thank you, Dave. Is there any other questions, Dick?
Yeah, I don't quite understand these numbers on your where it says date range, in compact, imported, date range. You have for the current year through July, you have 14,000 and everything else, all the previous years are much, much less. On the other hand, you've got a rather low Curie count. And it's not exactly the same with imported. Other years are a little bit higher in imported, but what accounts for, is there something strange about this year that makes your volume very high and your Curie count low?
Commissioner, I don't have the entire list, but I suspect that most of that is due to the ongoing successful decommissioning of the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant and the types of items that are coming out of Vermont Yankee to go into the facility at this point in time. Of course, we're starting at the top of the reactor vessel and moving downwards, and that tends to be, at least early on, some of the things with less curies. And perhaps you would see an increase in curies from Vermont Yankee as we move forward.
Yeah, and your volume is way up, but I take it that's probably Vermont Yankee also.
Right. I can go back and check, but I suspect that that is primarily due to that. There's been no significantly unusual activities otherwise in compact.
Does that have a particularly favorable effect on your finances?
Well, the in-compact generators enjoy much lower pricing than any other generators around the country. So certainly it's beneficial to us, but it is quite an attractive price for those generators as well.
Well, your imported volume is up pretty high too at 24. It's up higher than it's been the last few years. So you having a good year?
We've, as we look at the facility, we look at all the disposal facilities, the FWF, the RECRA facility, and the compact facility. Certainly the volumes are up for the compact facility this year, and that's a good thing for us. Yes.
Thank you.
Dave, I had one more question, and I should know this, and I might have even asked you before, and if I have, I apologize. What is the storage capacity that you have in Andrews? Not disposal, but actual storage.
I don't have that. We regularly put that out in reports to the TCEQ. We are able to store waste that's being prepared for disposal or that's going through some sort of processing to prepare it for disposal. And we periodically have to update our financial assurances to make sure our financial assurances align with the amount of waste that we have on site, and we have to make sure that amount of waste is less than what our financial assurances account for. But I'd have to come back at another meeting and talk about that if you're interested in it.
It doesn't have to be an exact number. I was just wondering what the potential capacity was, and you answered my other question, which was what kind of waste goes in the storage and how long it exists there. Is there anything in storage that is considered a long-term storage, or is it all generally relatively short in its duration in the storage facility?
So everything would tend to be short. Most of the things that would need to go through some sort of treatment would be going through treatment due to RECRA regulations and going into either the federal facility or the RECRA facility, because the compact waste facility cannot accept anything with RECRA constituents in it. For those RECRA constituents, you have a 365-day clock, so it would always have to be dealt with prior to the end of that 365-day clock.
Okay. Thank you. That helps me understand. Any other questions for Mr. Carlson? All right. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
With that, we will move on to item 7 in our agenda, which is a chairman's report. I am going to, and I didn't give her advance warning of this, so she might be mad at me, but I'm going to ask Diane Fulmer, if she is still on the line, to jump on with us, because the first item on our chairman's report is physical matters. And I know Diane has been working very hard recently to get our LAR done. I will distribute that to everyone for their review, hopefully maybe later today. But I just wanted, Diane, if you would, could you kind of describe that LAR process to us? And don't go into too much detail, but obviously kind of the 10,000 foot view of it.
Okay, all we're doing is submitting the request to the legislature and the governor's office for our budget for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. And it's based on what our budget was for 2020 and 2021 with a 5% reduction that the governor's office basically mandated, and we said, okay, we'll voluntarily comply since you can't really mandate to us. So really that's all we've done is just kind of prepared a budget at 95% of what the funding was for the biennium of 2020 and 2021.
And I know things are different this year just because everything's different this year, but what is the timeline of this LAR process?
So this year they came out with the letter about a week ago saying, here's your amounts and you need to get it done. And it's due September the 11th. So it's been about a, 3-week turnaround instead of a couple months that we normally have.
And then once we submit it, are we then subject to being questioned on an informal basis by LBB or any, either of the committees in
Yes, we'll be questioned informally and formally. So you'll have your hearing. I don't know when that's scheduled. That's usually after the first of the year to have your formal hearing, but we'll have informal questioning, I'm sure, shortly after the submission.
And from my perspective, the other thing we will obviously do is we will reach out to the appropriate elected officials and other government officials and educate them about why we're asking what we're asking for and justify our request. Obviously, in years past, we haven't necessarily spent every dollar we've been given in a budget. This year, because of our lack of staff, we've saved a lot of money because we haven't spent as much money on staff, and that will hopefully change next year. The other issue that I think we have before us that we have always asked for money for that we haven't necessarily used in the past is an outside attorney to advise us on some specific compact law issues. That is still in the budget, but we will be educating the interested parties on these issues in the coming weeks and months as we lead up to our obvious next big date, which is the legislative session that starts in January. And then, Diane, am I correct in saying that obviously once the legislative process starts, then those will be the formal hearings before the Appropriations Committee in the House and the Finance Committee in the Senate?
Correct.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about that process? I know it's doesn't grab too many people's attention, but I want to make sure everybody understands it. Okay. Thank you, Diane.
Sure, no problem.
The other issue on the chairman's report is our communications with other compacts and the forum. Again, I did not give him advance notice of this, but I was wondering if Dan Schrum would be willing to hop on. I will start off by saying we continue to attend all of the forum executive meetings. They're always very informative. I think the forum is doing a great job and really kind of reestablishing itself under Dan's leadership and the board's leadership. But I wanted to see if Dan, if you would you give us kind of the update on the October forum meeting that was otherwise going to be in San Antonio?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the forum meeting was planned to be in San Antonio, October 14th and 15th. Unfortunately, we will not be able to do that in person, but we will hold a virtual meeting, and the board has decided to allow that to be free of charge to anyone who would like to attend. So if you'd like to get to know the forum a little bit better and see some of the presentations that we'll be having on the 14th and 15th, we'll be getting a registration form out to you shortly, and you can please sign up.
The forum has also made the monumental error of asking me to speak at it, which I'm sure Dan will regret. But for right now, I will give an update on our activities, and so if anyone has any thoughts or comments or think that there's something critical that needs to be said, please let me know. so I can be sure and include that in whatever presentation I give as well. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And I guess anyone have any questions about the low-level forum, or like I said, it is an ongoing process, and obviously, like everything else in the world, COVID has slowed down its activities and some of its goals, but I still believe that the forum is on track where we were hoping where they would go, and I think they've done a very good job of that. With that concludes the chairman's report. We can now move on. Item 8.
Excuse me, Brandon. Don't we have a meeting scheduled on October 15th?
That's a good question. I know we have a meeting at some point in October, which is always subject to change. But if it overlaps with the forum meeting, we will obviously probably move that. But that's a very good point, Dick. So
I'm going to send pictures of foliage that during that time.
We were just hoping you'd put some cold weather in a package and send it to us. So if that is the case, we will move our meeting, obviously. So I will bring that back up when we talk about our last agenda item as well. So our next agenda item is number 8, which is a discussion of the NRC proposed interpretation of its very low-level radioactive waste disposal regulations. I have included in your packet, which is tab 17, the comments that we made, and then I've included some other comments from people that I know we care about their opinion. That includes TCEQ, WCS, an organization called NEI, and then maybe a couple others, I'm not sure. But the reason I've left this on the agenda is because on the eve of us submitting or actually, I think it was after we had submitted our comments, NRC came back and once again extended the deadline. The deadline is now into October, so we have the opportunity, if we want to undertake it, to expand, add additional comments. At this point, I feel comfortable with our comments, but I wanted you all to know that as time goes on and you learn additional items, if there's anything that you believe we need to add to those comments, we have that opportunity. Obviously, John and his committee put together those comments and they were wonderful, and I thought they covered everything. But if for some reason someone thinks we need to expand on them, or if there's other topics that you want covered, please feel free to reach out to John or I with any of those comments, because we will, I believe, based on the new deadline, probably have another meeting before we have the comment period end. So we may be able to get additional comments together and submit them if there is a desire for that. Anybody else have any questions or comments about this VLLW issue with NRC?
Do we have any indication whether opposition has kind of built to this, or whether there's any likelihood that they're going to withdraw this proposal?
I don't know if there's an indication from NRC yet as to what they intend to do. I will say that I've listened in on the phone calls and tried to read as many of the comments as I can. And there seems to be a clearer, a clear trend towards opposition to the proposed interpretation. Those tend to fall into two general categories. One, it's the specific kind of nuts and bolts of the problems with the proposed interpretation. Some of the vague issues, some of the practical manners in which a rule like this may come into use in the industry. And a lot of the comments that we've put in the packet kind of go through that. The other big issue is obviously the potential impact it has on the idea of the compact system, and in particular, the operation of the facility in Andrews. So I think I think both of those have legitimacy, obviously, and they're different in the sense that one is just kind of a public policy issue of if we want to promote low-level waste disposal facilities, this is not the way to do it. But the other side is, I think they get into the very specifics of some real perceived holes in the way the interpretation reads and some of the problems it could lead to on both a technical level and even just on a interpretation level. In particular, the one that always comes to mind is they don't really define what is very low-level waste. And it kind of is this fundamental thing at the front that you need that definition to understand how you proceed to carry out whatever the interpretation is. Then there's some other issues that probably maybe John or Linda or even Lisa can talk about that they have. There's some vagueness in their proposed interpretation about what kind of landfills could actually end up taking it. And I think the conclusion is, if read, at face value, it actually suggests that there's some municipal solid waste landfills that could be taking some of this. And there's been real questions about the ability of those landfills to properly handle even very low level radioactive waste. John or Linda or Lisa, do y'all have any additional comments?
Brandon, I would concur. I think there's significant concern about the ability of a standard municipal landfill to take radioactive waste and to handle it in a manner that is provides safety for the operators and properly protects the environment.
So anybody else have any questions or comments about this VLLW issue? Like I said, obviously, everything in your packet will provide you kind of what has been said to date. And if you think there's other things that we need to cover, please contact John or I, and we can work through that process. And with that, I think we will move on to item 9, which is our discussion and possible action regarding the contingency plan described in our enabling statute. I will turn it over to Commissioner Mundy. And before I do, let me say this. Obviously, all of you on the commission do yeoman's work, especially over the last year without staff. We've all had to pitch in, and all of you have done way above and beyond your duty to our commission. And I personally appreciate every single one of you. I know everyone who interacts with the commission does as well. On this particular issue, I have been overwhelmingly impressed with the work of the people on the contingency plan committee. That is Jeff Mundy, Linda Morris, and Peter. They have given up a lot of their time to this, have gone out and done individual work related to it, and it has been a major undertaking. And I will only speak for myself, but my guess is others on the committee may join me when I say it's also been frustrating. This is an important issue, and it is a hard one to tackle and find good solutions for. And so I just want to commend everybody on the committee, thank them for all their hard work, and express to them that while we're not quite to the finish line yet, we're getting close, and the work they put in is really going to, I think, benefit everyone who's an interested stakeholder in this facility and really the safe disposal of low-level radioactive waste in Vermont and Texas. So with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Mundy.
Yeah, I will say, hey, first, thank you for the comments, and I will echo what Brandon just said. We put in an incredible amount of work. A lot of technical issues came up and things we've explored. I had intended to just say we have a draft, we're working on it, and we're close. Some of the comments on the aileron permit kind of surfaced what we're doing behind the scenes. So I don't know, Brandon, if you would like me to give a preview of where we are, or just say we're going to have our report out. We're aiming probably for about 3 weeks. So it'll be out in circulation well in advance of the next meeting so people can review it and come back and make comments. My intention had been to just say we're close, we're working on it, and we'll get it to you in a few weeks. But since we kind of surfaced questions, I don't know if you want me to
I think it's worth it because I think we can have that, at least some of that discussion now as well, which may be instructive to those of us on the committee to hear what others on the commission think.
Sure. To kind of go to where we landed, and I will defer for a minute on all the various options we've explored, which is a lot. But my goal at the very beginning of this process and the other commissioners has been to try and come up with practical, real-world guidance and plan for the stakeholders, the users of this facility, the customers, if you will. Effectively, we're serving, I've been saying in our draft, 32 states. Now apparently we're, servicing the entire country to some degree or another. So it is a complicated problem. It's an unpleasant problem. No one wants to deal with radioactive waste in their state or backyard or counties, as a general rule. But what the contingency committee's been tackling is, if something happens to the Andrews facility for whatever reason, and there are a bunch that are foreseeable, there are a bunch that are unforeseeable, and I think everybody in this room, virtual room, if you told us a year ago we'd be sitting at home for 6 months locked up over coronavirus, we would have been shocked. So with that kind of background and context, we've tried to draft a plan that is very, I'll say, general in its description of what a contingent event is and how to respond to it. And where we are landing on things is that it's going to be largely what constitutes a contingent event will be undefined, but employ essentially a functional operational test that people who need to deliver shipments to the facility are unable to do so. And for some people, that may be a major problem. For some people, it may be a minor problem. Just depends on the amount of time of closure and what their situation is. The general framework of the plan, what we've worked on, is we're considering what powers we really actually have. And Lisa Edwards talked to this a minute ago, is there are a lot of legal constraints on this compact and the others and these facilities, and rightly so. So real world, what can we do? We can give out export permits. That's about it realistically. So that means for things in Class A, if somebody's in a situation and the facility is shut down for some indefinite period, and preference would be, say, like for the power plants, store in place, but if they can't or somebody else can't, Class A, we can hand out an export permit and then the shipment could go to Clive. That's essentially the solution for the Class A. Class B and C is very problematic and challenging because effectively right now in the current legal framework, there is not another facility where we can just hand out an export permit. I mean, we can give the permit, export permit, but there's no place to export it to at this moment for B and C. So where we are on B and C is strongly encouraging, and I emphasize very strongly encouraging everybody to shift your mindset to clean out the storage capacity as best you can of B and C and maintain as much as you reasonably can in normal business operations storage capacity for B and C waste in the event something happens where there's a disruption to operations and they have to store B and C in place for an indefinite period of time. There may be a situation where, let's say, my family's from West Texas and the Panhandle. I mean, tornadoes are a fact alive. Tornado could hit this thing, shut it down for 30 days, 90 days, or something else could happen. It could be closed for an indefinite period. So people need to be prepared to store, to the extent of their ability, B and C. So that means clean out the back room right now as best you can. And one just issue that we've identified recently, and ran it past Mr. Carlson, WCS, and he is generally amenable to the concept. This is a general piece of advice is if somebody has a big backlog of, let's say, B, and they say, you know what, the disposal fee is really stiff. I can't afford to clean out my whole backlog of B or C right now due to the disposal fee. Is I would encourage you to work with WCS, and then we will have, what we're going to put in our report is a recommendation that the state and Andrews County and WCS all work cooperatively to say, you know what, let's clean out all the backlog of B and C, let it ship right now, move it over to WCS, and then in turn, WCS work out some sort of payment plan. Literally, just like if you're going to go buy a house or a car, say, you know what, we'll move all of our backlog and let it pay out over time. And then that frees up storage space in the event a contingent event happens. And we all hope that it will never happen, but the coronavirus has demonstrated just there's a litany of things could occur beyond anybody's ability to even plan. And I want to emphasize the comments I made last time, and I think Brandon made, that this planning is a statutory requirement. It is a prudent and reasonable requirement for any business, much less one of this type of situation. And our comments and planning should in no way even slightly be construed to reflect on WCS's current operations, future operations, the likelihood of future operations. It truly has nothing to do with them. This has to do with us is oversight, planning for this state, effectively, you know, remainder of the country, how to deal with a difficult situation. And my comments and frustration earlier when we were discussing taking material from other areas that may have ability to put it into a different compact are not with the compact per se, but one of the early ideas that we had, again, keeping in mind this is for emergency situations, not routine business. If the facility were shut down, saying, hey, these other facilities, all the facilities agree to backstop each other in an emergency. And we really got a pretty stiff arm back saying, no thanks, politically it's hard, we don't want to do it, whatever. You know, realistically, the Andrews facility serves as the backstop for the other facilities. It will be there. We will be there to help in their emergency situations. And we would ask that they likewise consider it. Now, let's deal with B and C. Power plants create the bulk of the volume. And heeding my last comment, I would strongly encourage them to consider cleaning out the back room and working out the economics with the state and Andrews County and WCS to flatten out that payment curve if that's what it takes. But encourage y'all to clean out your rooms, make room. That's what we're expecting to happen with the power plants. And I particularly credit Linda Morris for this, have tried to identify, are there categories of people that don't have storage as a reasonable option? And if so, who that might be. So again, A, we can give an export permit, they go to Clive. B and C for the plants, do the best you can to free up your storage space to the best of your ability. But what we identified, or Linda identified, of somebody that doesn't have that option particularly on the table are two categories. There are some medical sources, and we've been told that it's about 100 cubic feet a year. So, you know, volume-wise, not huge, but it's primarily coming out of cancer treatment programs. They are just, hospitals, not the place to have people sticking stuff in broom closets and desk drawers. And that is, you know, that really is why my frustration is bubbling up is, you know, I don't want to see unnamed large cancer hospital on the news at night saying they're having disruptions to their treatment plans because of this kind of issue. So, you know, if somebody has a great idea on that, please let us know. The one other source that did not have an readily apparent solution that we've been informed about are flow meters, gauges, and valves, things of that nature that are utilized in the oil and chemical industry. There may be a little bit of downhole equipment like a pump or something, but what we were told primarily is flow meters, gauges, and valves. And this kind of thing where once it's taken out of service, it's put on the back of a tool truck and just rolls around town until it goes to WCS. So I would like to find a solution for that category other than just saying some guy's going to toss it on the back of his truck and leave it there. That's just not where we want to be as far as public health, industrial hygiene practices. It's just not a great idea. Is it some huge security risk? Probably not, but it's just not great for the guys on the truck or public policy. So that's the little small niches that we found where we do not have real good, great, not forget great, we don't have any good solution at this point. So that's kind of the overview, and I invite the Linda and Peter and Brandon, if y'all have other thoughts, something I've forgotten, please toss it on the table. I will tell you, we have spent, as Brandon mentioned, just endless hours exploring and brainstorming other ideas and solutions, and they run into dead ends for one reason or another. So that's kind of the preview of it.
We've identified a number of medical devices, primarily the irradiators, that a number of them there are some alternate pathways for disposal, such as the OSRP program, where they can return the devices to essentially, it's managed by Los Alamos National Laboratory. So there are some options. Also, they can return some sources and devices to the manufacturer of those devices, essentially for disposal. But there's a small component, medical and industrial devices and sources that may not have a pathway for disposal if we can no longer send them to WCS. So that is an issue.
And Jeff said this, but I will echo it. This is our statutory obligation. We have put it off long enough. We need to get a plan in place. We understand whatever that plan may end up being, but in no way should it be construed as a statement about any kind of anticipated closure of the Andrews County facility. We don't have any indication that that's going to happen anytime, and so we're hoping that this is a plan that hopefully is never needed, but at a minimum is not needed for many years to come. But that doesn't change the fact that we still do need to do it. It is the prudent thing to do, and it's our statutory obligation, if nothing else. So I know that in some ways it casts an odd impression, but I want to make it clear, as Jeff did, that nothing about this is an indication that we think anything's happening in the near future. So, but again, it is. I think the outcome that you will receive in writing may not be fully indicative of how much work's gone into it. So let me say again that I really appreciate all the work that the committee has done. And I think, unfortunately, we had to turn over all these stones to make some of the conclusions we're about to make. And like I said, they may not, when you get it, you may think, where did all the work go? But I think all the work went to the dead ends that Jeff talked about. So with that, I'll open it up. Is there any other questions for the Contingency Plan Committee from anyone else?
So I guess I'll start it off on your deal, Jeff. I appreciate all y'all's work on this. Being in county government for 38 years and 18 of it being the county judge, I don't know how, and I know where you're going, Jeff, with the payment thing, but unless it's legislated by law, I don't know how the vendors that come in are going to be able to pay on a time payment basis to the county and the state. I think that's a legislative mandate we may have to go to.
Okay.
I don't think we can do that by rule.
All right, you don't think or WCS could enter a contract that accepts loads now with payments over time?
No, but I think you know, my thing of it 18 years ago was when that truck went across the weight scale, the state and the county got paid right then.
Yeah. Well, that's what, at one point, one audience for this report is the legislators and identifying where, if changes are needed, where they can make some changes going into the session. And so that I'll put a note in about that and have them weigh that in. But if you think of anything else, holler at me. But right now, we're just trying to maximize storage capacity to the extent it's available.
Yeah, I get that. And I really appreciate you trying to tell everybody to bring their stuff, but good luck with that. Because
I hear you. Well,
I've been saying it for 18 years.
Make suggestions at some point. I understand that.
yeah.
And then on Linda's thing, you know, about the hospitals, that was the biggest thing when this thing was getting voted on around here was we're going to clean up. And I think we have. I don't know how much y'all talked to the Department of Health, but we've cleaned up a lot of A, B, and C in the hospitals and stuff. We had, like, if I remember right, 1,200 different places, Linda, when we first started that, you know, had a license to store it, and they may be still storing it. But, you know, I think we're doing good to get all that cleaned up. You know, it doesn't need to be in a hospital, and it doesn't need to be in a university either.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff sitting around them that nobody wants to own up to, because every time you own up to it, you're going to have to pay.
Yeah, we actually, there's the two-year rule, or 24-month rule that the Texas Department of State Health Services has. That's helped a lot. I understand they've given out in the last couple of years since the rule's been in effect, like 30 or 40 notices of violation for that rule. So it is encouraging people to clean out the closet, so to speak. With the medical community and our large medical generators, there are a number of medical devices, a lot of things they can do for decay and storage, which is helpful for the brachytherapy. So that's helpful. But they've identified when I start talking with these folks, they say, but you know, we've got this device. It's going to eventually have to be decommissioned an accelerator at some point in the future. So it might be irradiated metals. So they start thinking about it and they start saying, yeah, well, you actually have this, this, and this. So at least these conversations we've had with these folks have started them thinking possibly what they could do and what they should be doing. So maybe a light bulb's going off and might help. Not sure about that, but we can be hopeful. But the bottom line is that we need our WCS facility because of the B and C waste that materials that will eventually need disposal, if not right away in the 24-month rule, because these devices may still be in use, but eventually. So that is a big concern.
And I see that there's been a question from Kieran Haddon of whether or not the draft contingency plan is available to the public. And the answer is no, because the draft isn't completed yet. It will be completed, circulated to commissioners for their consideration, and then brought up at a subsequent meeting. So when it's brought up at a subsequent meeting, I think the draft plan will be made available to the public unless Dave Gordon tells me it shouldn't be. But it's not even finalized yet to where it could be shared even if we wanted to.
Yeah, we're making edits and additions. I mean, we really just got a solid working draft in the last week. And we're making edits and comments and literally working on it right now. The goal is to have it available in a few weeks, subject to whatever advice we get from the AG's office.
And the Commissioner recommended be for one of the first people to admit this, but when you start thinking about it, this may be a fairly short plan based upon the constraints placed upon us by the state of Texas. So
definitely. At one point, we thought it was going to be a page-long document when we started on it, and it has grown a little beyond that, but it's very different in feel than the 2016 version that was out there. This is really, I would view this more as guidance and comments and planning. And some things will require legislative changes.
Any other comments?
Y'all good with TCQ and their interaction with you, Jeff?
We had a meeting with their staff, and I think they provided the input they could provide. Again, they have a lot of boundaries put in by law, and so their hands are tied to a large degree. But we have interacted with them and sought their guidance and thoughts and comments.
And Judge, I think the ultimate issue here is there a political will to have this facility stay open in the event of a contingency? And I don't know that I don't think we know the answer to that. And I don't know when we would know the answer to that, because we obviously don't control it. And so to me, that's the ultimate question as to whether or not the continued operation of the site in Andrews could occur if for any reason there was a contingent event that caused the current operator to stop operating.
Yeah. It's to reiterate a comment I made last meeting, and I'll say it again, and it's truer now than ever. Given the current budget situation, I do not think anybody should be expecting the state to step in and take over operation of this facility, at least in the current structure. The budgets are going to be tight going into the next session, and adding a major budget item I just don't see as a realistic expectation. So that's why we are trying to come up with plans that do not involve state taking over operation. One of the ideas, or at least, things on our options for the state to consider, Brandon, Linda, y'all weigh in, but whatever the prior state aid authority was, Texas Low-Level Radioactive Authority or something like close to that name, the state might be in a position to have to reconsider if they want to, if there's political will to keep this operating in a contingency scenario, reactivating that authority, have it issue some bonds to get this thing up and running again. But in the current configuration, TCQ's made very clear they do not feel they have the legal authority to step in and take over operation. So if it's a long-term, indefinite, contingent event with no apparent intent by the current operator to come back and get it open or ability, it probably, the TCQ mindset we heard was they will head towards closure. And then the question is, what does it take to get it reopened in the future? And again, I just cannot emphasize enough, people really should be prepared to store for at least, some number of years, if that's what it takes to get a legislative fix. I mean, these problems are complicated and politically really unpleasant for anybody to deal with. So that's why we make the comment about the storage situation.
And in response to another question that Karen put in the chat, she asked if there's going to be a point person designated to handle emergencies or a potential halt to operations. I don't know that there's going to be a single person. Obviously, WCS has plans for emergency situations, like a potential weather event or some sort of temporary cessation of their activities. Obviously, TCQ has some statutory authority to step in emergency situations to either take control of the site or take certain actions to secure it. That is what is in place now is the closure and post-closure bonds, which are the financial assurances that you heard Dave Carlson talk about earlier. Those could be used by TCEQ to close the site and then, secure it and put in place the monitoring that would be required to monitor a site like that after closure. But I don't know that there has been in any of our statutes a specific person or even a specific division of an agency appointed to be the point person to handle emergencies. So I think that's one of the many things that we may discuss, that the need for a point person might be something that legislators consider as they make a decision on what kind of legislative changes they may want to make.
I think dishes deals with certain categories of emergencies. I know in dealing with pipeline scenarios, there was a situation in Gillespie County a couple months ago, and dishes was the agency responsible for dealing with that emergency response.
And broadly speaking, I've always understood the division of authority to be that dishes has to do with the transportation issues. TCEQ obviously is the on-site regulator from an environmental standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But that's probably a little overgeneralized, but generally I think you're correct. Any other questions?
Dick has
Dick?
one.
I'm this is kind of an unformed question, but I'm trying to figure out the kind of basic commitments here. Vermont, initially, I think the idea was the state of Texas was going to do this whole thing. Then the state decided that they should get a private operator. Vermont, I think, went into it probably first on the assumption that the state would provide one way or another here. Is it not the case that in the final analysis, the state of Texas has got to be responsible for having this facility available? Or has that somehow changed? Just the kind of basic concept of it.
Well, let me say, with my tongue firmly implanted in my cheek, that may be a question that you need to ask the Vermont Attorney General. And it is not a decision that we would make or something that we would take a position on. That is an issue largely of contract between the state of Vermont and the state of Texas. And I don't know that I don't even know that I have an opinion on it, much less an answer.
Dick, also, there could be scenarios where there's a physical, degradation, I mean, I don't want to get too far down this path. It's something for more like an executive session. You could deal with scenarios where there is a physical attack on the facility and it's physically inoperable for an extended period. And so apart from whether Texas did or didn't have a legal obligation to keep it running, it physically may not be capable of being open for operation for some extended period.
Yeah, that's very true. And I know Lisa just mentioned to me that she wanted to make a comment. So Lisa, are you still available to speak?
I am. I guess clearly the lawyers would probably have to get together and figure out the actual answer to the question. But to me, the compact is here to serve the compact members, Vermont and Texas. There's no, upper level or lower level where if the compact closes, there's some higher obligation to one of the compact members over the other. So, if it closes, it's not available to anyone in the compact. Each state has made a significant investment in this site to have it available for our generators and compact. And I don't know why there's a presumption of an obligation that somehow the Vermont interests would have to be served over the Texas interests. That's just my thought.
Well, I'm going to just kind of the basic deal and the premises on which we both got into it. And my recollection is that, Bob used to kind of go through this whole thing about how Texas initially it was going to be a state, in effect, a state agency. But, passing that for the moment, because I don't think we're going to get anywhere on that at this point. This raises in my mind what I think is a responsibility of this commission to have a better idea of the finances, or at least the financial viability of this site. Now I realize all the business about how this is a hush-hush thing between TCEQ and the site operator and all that. But it seems to me that this commission should have some idea of the viability. A year ago or so, you know, all of a sudden we were told, boom, we're going to go into bankruptcy. We've got to be taken over by our major competitor, or we're going down. And that's a real shockwave, it seems to me. And I don't see why there is no ability on our part to have at least an idea of how viable this operation is, and not be just suddenly surprised by their saying, boom, we're going under. I don't know whether anybody else shares my concern, but and I realize that some of this is probably not for public consumption. Certainly the TCEQ isn't making it publicly available. They don't even make it available to us. But I think we should have an idea of the viability of the operation.
And Dick, I understand your concerns, and I obviously share a lot of them. I will say this, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here when I say this. WCS has been very forthright in that they are currently in the red, and they have given general ranges of how far in the red they are. So the issue is that economic viability may be a hard metric to even measure, because there's no question that as they are currently operating, in years past, they have lost money. So I mean, by your standard concept of, well, does economic viability mean you're in the black? The answer is no. But they have chosen to continue and work very hard, I think, to try to refine both their process, their pricing, obviously some of their issues that they have tried to address at the legislature, to try to get closer to at least break even. And I'm sure that will happen again in the coming session. And so the question isn't really economic viability, it's what do the owners of WCS want to do if they continue to not find a way to work themselves into a profit. And hopefully they find a way to work themselves into a profit, and that solves everything. But if they don't, then the question becomes, do they view it as a valuable asset to whether they want to continue operating at a loss, or do they want to stop it? So I don't know that, I mean, my guess is that decision hasn't been made. And my guess also is that it is a somewhat subjective decision on the owner's part of WCS. So I don't know that even if we got to look at all of their books from top to bottom, it would necessarily give us an answer to the question that you're posing.
Okay, but fair enough. But you get a situation like this year where, as I noted, you know, they've got much more coming in to the site than they have in other recent years. And it wasn't so long ago that they said they were gone. They were in bankruptcy. I don't know how their finances work in terms of incentives of having a profit or a loss. I mean, it may be that for reasons there at Lehman, they want to run it at a loss. I don't know. But I don't know. I have felt that with that
Dick, I can say on the incentive side, one thing we haven't delved into the scenario because there are some legal questions, but pragmatically, the WCS's parent company also is the owner of the Vermont, or the entity that owns Vermont Yankee, which is Vermont's concern. I would hope and I would expect that they will be mindful of not stranding one company that's left holding the bag with Vermont Yankee if it's the same parent company dealing with both ends of this. So I think, pragmatically, they're not going to jeopardize their holdings on that end. That's just a guess.
And again, I think that
no sooner did I start griping about things than my machine cut me off. Coincidence?
probably.
Peter, Dick, I will say, Peter, remember, we had Peter on the committee to represent Vermont interest, and he's done a good job of it. And we only meet when all commissioners are available. We've met almost every single week with just a couple of exceptions, but these questions and concerns about what obligations are owed to Vermont, are important concerns, but as Lisa pointed out, there are also concerns for our Texas stakeholders too. And that's why we over and over say, I think it's in everybody's interest to make sure this facility stays viable and operational. And for people that don't like radioactive waste or disposal, I get it, 101%. I'm not thrilled with it, but the only thing worse than having it in this facility is not having it in any facility and just rumbling around out in the back rooms and yards and trucks. So it really does behoove everybody at all levels to try and do what they can to make this thing successful.
As an aside, Mary Miller has asked if there is a email method for attendees to provide comments on our contingency plan. You can always send those to, I believe this is correct, administration@TLLRWDCC.org. That is our main administrative email address, so you can always send things there, and several of us monitor that email address, so we can, anything you send in that you'd like to comment about the contingency plan can be directed to that email address.
And back in May, we had put out a request for public comment, and it has the email address on there. And the last time I looked, which was last week, that request for comment with the email address is still up on the Compact website. So go look for that place where it asks for public comment, and you can submit it to that email address.
Thank you. I forgot about that, Jeff.
Yeah.
Any other comments about the contingency planning process, or anything that you want the committee to know as we begin the process to hopefully finalize a draft that we get to everyone? Okay, I think that will conclude our discussion about contingency planning then, and we can move on to item 10, which is the discussion concerning the charge and focus of the capacity committee. As a brief introduction, Lisa Edwards is chairing our capacity committee. She and Linda have been meeting to discuss what the capacity committee is kind of define its scope and what it's trying to do. My broad idea about the capacity committee is, and this is reflective of the questions I asked Dave Carlson earlier, sometimes I think capacity means different things to different people. And I want to make sure that we as a commission get to the point where we have a kind of a well-defined set of terms that we use, and then get as accurate a measure as we can as to what we want to know about capacity. There's a lot of, one of our, again, primary charges is to protect capacity at the Andrews County facility for our in-compact generators, which is taken into account every time we make a decision about an import application. So capacity is something that to date really has not been an issue, and may not be an issue in the future either. But I thought it is important that we help define the concept, work through some of the ideas of what the way different measures and different ways you can look at capacity. And so I wanted to, first of all, ask Lisa to comment on where she thinks the capacity committee is, and then open it up again to anyone else who wants to comment about what they think this committee should be tackling and how they should be going about doing it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Hi, Brandon, or Commissioner Hurley. So I don't have a lot of new information to impart since the last meeting. Linda is also on the committee, and I think a great deal of time's been assumed by the contingency planning. We do have a framework that I described last time relative to the kinds of definitions we're interested in, which is really a picture of total license capacity for both volume and curies versus as built versus as needed capacity that's expected through decommissioning for our major compact generators. And right now we're working on how we think that could be best visualized. We've gotten some information from WCS that's helping with that. But I think by the next meeting, we should have more to report.
Okay. And Linda, let me apologize, because if you just saw the things we asked Linda to do, you'd think we don't like her, but that's not the case at all. But we put her on every committee that's currently working. So I want to apologize for the workload that we've placed upon her shoulders, but thank you very much for all your efforts. Any other comments about the capacity committee? All right, hearing none, we will move on to item 11, which we have already discussed, at least in part, and this is dates and locations of future commission meetings in 20 and 21. And that is tab 18 in your notebook, commissioners. As has been pointed out, we had previously picked October 15th, but obviously we weren't thinking in terms of the low-level forum meeting. So we will need to move our next meeting. I am hesitant to move it up simply because there are obvious timelines that come into play that people may have been relying on that October 15th meeting date. So I think the appropriate thing to do is to move it back a week or two. And I wanted to see if everyone has their calendars up, if October, I guess it would be either the 22nd or the 29th would be a problem for our next meeting. And while you're looking at your calendars, let me say this. Obviously, we want to meet in person when we can, but under the current environment, I don't know if we'll be able to do that in October, or for that matter, our December meeting. Everything is up in the air, as it is for every business and governmental group that are trying to meet now. I think the prudent way to plan for this is assume we're going to meet virtually, and if things change, then we'd obviously let everyone know as soon as that decision was made. But as long as the governor's office is providing us guidance to meet this way, we will. And we're obviously very cognizant of, we don't want to expose anyone to COVID-19. And so I think this is a prudent way, and maybe not ideal, but at least prudent way to meet. And we'll probably continue to do that until we are told otherwise by the experts. So with that being said, is there a preference between the 22nd or the 29th in October for our next meeting?
The 29th is a little better for me, but I think I can do either one.
Anyone have a problem with the 29th? That actually works better for me as well. Okay, well, we will revise our meeting dates on our website, and we will list our next meeting. If we meet in person, it will be in Austin. Otherwise, it will be virtually, and it will be October 29th, which kind of raises the question of, should we meet again on December 10th? I would probably like to move that one back a week as well, which I know gets somewhat close to Christmas. But I hate to have two meetings too close in proximity. So we will probably move, unless someone tells me otherwise, we'll probably move that other meeting back to December 17th. And again, we never meet just to meet. If for any reason we don't have a good cause to meet on December 17th, we will likely cancel that. And by the next meeting, we will have a calendar for 2021 to meet as well. Obviously, nothing probably in the month of January, but we will probably try to meet back again beginning in February. Any other questions about future meetings or the locations or the way we're going to conduct them? All right, it is 11:31, and I think we have completed our agenda. Therefore, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion and a second. Is all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. That concludes our meeting for today. Thank you for your participation, all of you in the audience as well.